Hello and welcome to this first episode of the Pantydeal podcast. I am your host for today. My name is Dragon Lady and I am a member of Pantydeal and I have been selling on Pantydeal for approximately 6 months now. So I'm still relatively new, I think, to the whole panty selling game, but I certainly have picked up a thing or two. And what you may or may not know about me is that I am super passionate about all things panty selling. And for that reason, Pantydeal very kindly asked me to host today's podcast and to give you just a little bit more information if you are new to Pantydeal, or even if you've been selling for quite a while on Pantydeal. There's always more to learn. There's always more things to think about and discuss. And that's ultimately what this podcast is all about. We're going to be looking at all things related to panty selling on Pantydeal and just make sure that our members have as much information as possible and a bit of a voice, a bit of a community feel. So you know, this podcast is really informal, conversational, and ultimately it's here for you. And if you have any topics that you would really like to see discussed, or, you know, if you have any comments or suggestions, then of course feed them back to Pantydeal and I'm sure they would be open to more communication around panty selling because, you know, let's face it, that's what we're all here for. We're all interested in it and we all want to succeed in terms of buying and selling. So that's what the podcast is all about. We are going to be covering lots of different things as the weeks go on. So today's topic is all about how to get started with Pantydeal because that feels like the most obvious starting place for the podcast. If you're new, or like I said, if you've been there for a while, but you know, maybe you have some questions or things that you're just unsure of, then today's podcast is going to be for you. We're going to talk about all things to do with your profile and your description and images and things like that. But going forward, we'll be talking about things like how to make sales and how to communicate with potential buyers and how to, you know, how to price, for example, because that's something that comes up quite a lot. And customer relationships, all things related to panty selling. So this really is a great avenue to share that kind of information. So I hope you're as excited as I am with regards to today's podcast because, I've got lots to talk to you about. So as I've said, today's topic is all about getting started on Pantydeal. And I don't know about you, but for me, when I was new to the site, when I had just joined, I had no previous experience with regards to selling panties online or selling online in general, and particularly for this kind of area where I didn't fully understand it. So I felt completely like a fish out of water. I really wished that I had somebody to just kind of walk me through exactly what I had to do. Now, don't get me wrong, Pantydeal is obviously set up very easily. It's quite simple, and you know, I more or less had it worked out in probably an hour or so, like the functionality, how to use different things and what I had to do. But I still felt a little bit daunted by the whole process. So hopefully what we're going to cover today will allow you to just have your hand held through the process and to be able to kind of go from just signing up to making your first sale very easily, because that's what we're all about, isn't it? So the good thing about Pantydeal is that you have access to thousands and thousands of customers globally. But again, like that can feel a little bit daunting because you kind of feel like, well, if I don't have it right, like if I've missed something out, am I going to come across as unprofessional, or is somebody going to misunderstand something that I'm selling? So you really want to make sure that you get it right as quickly as possible. Now, don't get me wrong, I learned a lot. It was a very steep learning curve for me, but I want to take out some of the unnecessary risk you may be taking by just having gaps in your profile or not being clear about what you sell. So that's what we're going to look at today. And the other thing to mention is if you're not accustomed to selling online, then it can feel a little bit scary because, sales are a huge topic and there's so much to it that, again, you kind of want to have the bare minimum understanding of what it is that you're trying to do before you start doing it. And that way, you're just setting yourself up for success, okay? So let's get started, shall we? The first thing that you have to do after you have become a premium member on the site is to set up your profile, okay? Like, that's the first obvious step. And it's really important. I try and say this all the time to new sellers, that it's important not to underestimate the power of a really good profile, okay? A really well-written profile, because this is how you are going to communicate with your potential customers. And we all know that first impressions are everything. So it pays, literally, to take the time and effort to actually put some energy into this whole thing, okay? To not just sort of like slapdash something down and think, oh, well, that'll do, right? Because it won't. You really have to go the extra mile and make sure that everything is, in place. So the first step is obviously your profile picture. And it goes without saying that you need to choose a really high quality, well-lit profile picture that's ultimately going to show off your best asset or assets, whatever those may be. And if you don't feel comfortable showing your face, you absolutely don't have to do that. You'll find when you're on the site that there are maybe, I'm going to say like 50% of sellers who aren't showing their face in their profile description and 50% who are. And there's no right or wrong there. It really comes down to what you're comfortable with. And, another thing is, if you don't mind showing your face, it might be a good idea for you to experiment and see, well, what happens when I change my profile description to my face versus when I use this alternative picture. And that's something that I've certainly played around with in the past. And I've noticed that, at times when I have a particular profile picture, I get maybe more interest from potential customers than when I have something else. So it's all about testing, your audience, I guess, and seeing what works for you. So for that reason, I usually recommend that sellers have maybe between 3 and 6 different profile pictures that they use, because what I noticed was that the top sellers that, I got to know over the weeks usually changed up their profile picture from time to time, and it kept things fresh and interesting. And I thought, oh, that's a really good idea. I'm going to start doing that as well. And it's the same as any social media platform that you may be on. From time to time, you take a really good picture and you think, oh, I'm going to make that my new profile picture now, right? So it's exactly the same here. And it's just good at sort of showing customers different sides of you and, just feeling like you're keeping things fresh. So for that reason, just play around with it and experiment and see what works for you. But even if you don't decide to show your face, whatever you are putting in your profile picture, you can be a little bit different and, dare to stand out a little bit. You don't have to go for the same kinds of shots that you see everyone else doing. You can try different angles. You can try different backgrounds. Like I've seen profile pictures where people are upside down or all kinds of things. And it's just fun. It's good to play around with it and see, what works for you ultimately. But yeah, just make sure that whatever you use, it's a really good high quality image, because like I said, first impressions are everything, and your profile picture is the first thing that customers are going to see. And once you've picked your profile picture, then you can pick your cover photo, which is something that Pantydeal offers, so that you can further personalize your page. So they have a range of stock images that you may decide to use. But for me, I always thought that it was a next level, if you like, to use another image of myself to just really make my page all about me. So it's up to you whether you want to choose a stock image or another image of yourself. But again, that's just something to sort of further personalize your page. Okay, so after you've chosen your profile picture or profile pictures that you're going to use, the next step is to fill in your profile description. And again, this is often overlooked, but it really is an important part of your overall profile, okay? So don't be afraid to tell potential customers a little bit about you, because the thing about selling is that ultimately your customers want to buy you, right? I mean, they want to buy your energy, they want to buy who you are. And so this is your perfect time to tell them a little bit about you, okay? And to give them an idea about who you are. And because we're all individual and unique, then really your profile ought to be kind of a little bit individual and unique to be about you. Now, nobody's suggesting that you give away loads of personal or private information, but it's more than possible to create a really distinct and unique profile that is just uniquely you. So again, this is a place where a lot of people stumble, and I completely understand that. You know, if you were filling in a profile on a dating site, it's exactly the same thing, isn't it? Because it's really hard for us to talk about ourselves because we don't want to appear, you know, maybe too big-headed, or, you know, we're just kind of not used to doing it. So this is something that you might have to take some time over, but equally, it's not something that has to be 100% perfect or 100% finished in one go. So for me, I've tweaked my profile description a few times here and there. Overall, I'm quite happy with it because I feel like it covers most of the information that I want to share. But it's something that you can, you know, swap and change around as time goes on. So don't put too much pressure on yourself with regards to your description, but equally make sure that you know how important it is. So some of the things that you might want to include in your profile description are the following. Your physical attributes, okay? So telling people what you look like, or, you know, some of your measurements, things like that, because it's not always obvious from your profile picture what your size is, or the color of your hair, or, you know, things like shoe size and height and weight. For, you know, some customers, that kind of stuff is really important. So you may want to put a little bit about that. Or, you know, if you're curvy, say you're curvy, or you're slim or athletic, that kind of stuff, you know. And secondly, a little bit about maybe why you're interested or excited about selling your used panties. Because for me, a lot of customers are really interested in that. And that will be a question that I get time and time again, like, why are you interested in this work? So again, it's something that you may want to include a sentence or two about. Thirdly, interests and how you spend your free time. So in your profile description, there is a separate section for hobbies. But again, I think this is just really important for giving people a feel of like how you like to spend your time, things that you do the weekend, all that kind of stuff, because it adds to your personality and ultimately who you are. Another thing you may want to include is general pricing for your items. Again, there's no rule around this, but a lot of sellers like to include that, just so that it gives potential customers an idea of how much they're going to charge for things without having to go through every single item in their shop. So it can actually save customers time just to have a general outline of how much things cost in your shop, okay? Any additional services that you offer, so if you provide, say, pictures or videos or things like that, then you can certainly add that to your profile description here. Any kinks or fetishes you have, you may not have any, that's completely okay, but sometimes people do, and it's just, again, people can be curious, especially because essentially this is a site that caters to fetishists. I almost didn't say that properly. So, you know, it doesn't hurt if you have one of your own to put it in there, and people might be interested in that. Boundaries or limits. So, for example, things that you're not selling, or if you don't show your face, then again, it's really useful to put this in your profile description, because this may be a deal breaker for some customers, and rather than have, you know, back and forth conversation and then it come out that, oh, well, actually I don't show my face or whatever, then, you know, it saves time and energy just to have your boundaries and your limits in your profile description. And then everybody knows before they contact you, hopefully, about what you're willing to do and what you're not, okay? And then finally, any specialities that you have in satisfying particular desires. So an example of this would be like if you're a MILF, you know, because MILFs are desirable by certain customers. So, you know, if you're getting that information in there, then people who are looking for you specifically will know that you are able to help them. Okay, so that's just a general outline. You may decide to be more creative and put in different things. I've seen, erotica and quotes and poems and, all kinds of things in there. And it doesn't hurt to just be creative and dare to be different. The last thing that we want, or the last thing that anyone wants, is profile description after profile description that are all exactly the same. And so it goes without saying that it's really important not to plagiarize or copy and paste other sellers' profiles, because it's kind of a bit disheartening for sellers if they put some time and energy into writing a description only to find that somebody else has copied it. So that's like a no-go. We don't like that. We don't like to do that. So, put the effort into creating something that's yours. And if you are willing to stand out, then that can reap a lot of benefits for you further down the line when you are, say the 50th profile that somebody's checked and it's, completely different from whatever came before it. I just think personally that's a big deal for me, and I like to make my profile description uniquely mine. Okay, so I hope that gives you a general overview of what to include. But again, like I said, don't get caught up in making it absolutely perfect, because it's something that you can always change as you go along. Okay, so the next thing that you're going to want to set up is your shop. Okay, so you've got your profile picture, you spent time on your profile description, you have, maybe a few images for your profile picture that you can change around. And the next thing we're going to do is actually start working on adding items to your shop. Now, this can be relatively time consuming, so don't feel like you have to have everything up and running straight away. For me personally, I was adding things, every few days to sort of build it up over time, because if you have, say 30 pairs of panties, it can feel a little bit overwhelming to think, oh my goodness, I have to get all of that in my shop right now. So take your time with it and don't rush, because there's lots of time and, you'll get there, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, the first thing that you want to do is, of course, have images of the items available and think about exactly what it is that you want to sell. So the important thing to point out here is Pantydeal makes it really easy for you to sell not just used panties, but other items as well, right? Such as like picture sets and videos. So, if you want to, you can start with the panties and then just build from there. But again, it goes back to what I said about your profile picture. You want to make sure that you are taking really good quality photographs of your stock, okay? Make the pictures as visually appealing as possible in order to attract more customers, okay? So again, there's a little bit of a split here. A lot of sellers decide that they will take pictures of them wearing their items, and then other sellers take pictures of just the items themselves. Again, this is a personal preference for you. You may decide that you would rather just take the picture of the image and not be wearing it. Either way is fine, you decide. And again, it may be something that you want to experiment with and have, both images and see which one kind of gets more interest or more views or, encourages more customers to reach out to you, okay? And then you make a decision based on that. But there's no right or wrong. As long as the photographs are really good quality, that is the most important thing. And, also you want to make sure that the detail is shown and that people can see exactly what it is. So there's nothing worse than sort of looking at a photograph and then having to squint to actually make out what it is. So if you are laying the item out on a background, try to make it a really blank background where it's not too busy, like no patterns or things like that, because it can be very confusing and it's not as visually appealing to people to have to sort of squint and try and make out what it is that they're looking at. And especially, if something's a thong, then you maybe want to make sure that the image shows that it's a thong and not a full back. Things like that, just to pay attention to, okay? And what a lot of sellers decide to do at this point is maybe take like 2 or 3 pictures of one item and then use an app to actually create one image that shows different angles of it. So like I said, if something's a thong, but it maybe has a really pretty front, then you might want to show the front and the back. Well, using particular apps will allow you to do that in one image. And the main apps that people tend to use for selling are Pic Collage, so that's PIC Collage, and Canva. But there are hundreds and hundreds of them out there. If you just go to your app store and click, like photo editor or layout or things like that, then they'll come up and you can play around with them. But certainly Pic Collage is the one that I've used the most. And it's just really handy because you don't have to be a graphic designer to create a really nice image, because they give you layouts and they give you fonts and you can make it really pretty. But a lot of sellers like to do that just because it gives them more creativity, but it also means that they can put wording over the image itself and kind of make that an advert, if you like, a separate advert for their items. But more importantly than that, some people like to have their own name over their images, so whatever their handle is on Pantydeal. And some people like to watermark their images so that they can't be used anywhere else. And that's just, that's a personal preference. Most sellers don't do that, but a lot do and really stick by that rule. So it's up to you. You can make the decision. Certainly, this is the internet, and ideally you want to make sure that any image that belongs to you shows your name on it. So yeah, experiment with the apps and see what you would like to create and play around with it. Have fun, be creative. That's a really important good point of this work, is that you get to sort of inject your own personality into your items. So once you have the images of all your stock, the next thing to do is to upload them into your shop and to create descriptions of each item. So as with your profile description, you want to get just the right balance of information about each item, okay? So keep it light and fun, but do put as much detail as you feel comfortable with into this section. So, for example, there are some buyers who are really particular about the type of material of panties, like it really is a make or break for them. And equally, a lot want to know the exact size of your item, and others, maybe only like thongs. They're not interested in full back. So information like that can be really helpful to potential customers, because, you have to see things from their perspective. If they're going onto a shop and there's just hardly any detail about the item and it's not clear from the image, answers to their question, then it can just be a little bit off-putting. And then, of course, they maybe have to message you and ask. But if the information's there, then they can kind of make the decision themselves. So, like I said, try and make sure that the bare minimum of information is in the item description, but you don't have to go overboard. Again, you can be really creative and fun, and you can say a little bit about, your history with the panties or what you do with them, or if you include any extras, then this would be the place to mention that along with any additional pricing for those extras. Okay, so just use this space to get your key information across, because if you are providing enough information, then you won't have message after message after message asking you the same question over and over. So it really pays to have all the information, not just in your item descriptions, but in your profile description too. And that way you won't have people asking you the same question over and over. Okay, so it's just common sense. Another important thing to mention at this point is that you're going to have to put in the price of your item. And this can be a stumbling block for many, especially those who are new to the site or have never done this before or no experience with this. Just how much do you charge? That for me, it was great because I was putting everything in the shop, and then I was like, oh, hang on, how much should I be charging for this? And there's no right or wrong answer here. Everybody prices within a general range, but there is no agreed pricing structure across the board. But if you are unsure of how much you want to charge for particular items, then the best thing to do is to have a look at other sellers' profiles to just get an idea of how much they're charging for equal or similar products. So, for example, if you have a pair of panties that are satin or really, designer or whatever, then of course you may charge more than somebody would charge for, normal, normal panties, if you like. But it doesn't hurt to just sort of maybe check out 10 or 15 profiles, and that way you get a really firm understanding of what the range is and where you would like to position yourself within that range. So I'm sure sales and pricing and things like that will be something we touch on further down the line, but for just now, just get an idea and then make a decision that feels appropriate for you and stick to that. And also, you can always change your mind later, up your prices, lower your prices, play around, offer deals, things like that. So there's no hard and fast rule at this stage. Just get something out there, get it in your shop and start selling. That's the most important thing at this point, okay? So once you have added some items to your shop, in order to sort of start finishing off your profile, you'll notice that there are photo albums available. And again, this is just something that I would recommend before you actively start selling, is to have additional photographs in a photo album on your page. Because if somebody clicks into your page to see a little bit more about you, they've seen what you look like through your profile description, your profile picture rather, they've read your profile description, they've maybe had a look through your shop to see what you have to offer, and then they maybe just want to finish things off by having a little look at your photo albums just to get more of a feel of what you look like, for example. So it doesn't hurt to have 5 to 10 additional photographs, and they will also show up on your profile page so that it just sort of completes the page, if you like. Someone's clicking on and they're getting a really full picture of who you are and what you're all about. So again, that's just something that I would recommend, is to include some other pictures in your photo albums. And you may decide to have separate photo albums as well that showcase some of your products, different products like socks or bras or whatever. It's up to you, just be creative, but it's something else to think about. So perhaps you've already added all items to your shop, and then you're starting to see that, there are other options on Pantydeal for me to sell more. And at this point, you may decide that, well, actually, I'm just going to stick to panties, or actually, no, I have more that I could sell that I didn't realize I could sell. That's definitely the position I was in when I joined the site. I was like, wow, I didn't know I could sell jeans or shoes or things like that. So it could be at that point that you decide you're going to add other items as well to your shop. But again, it's down to you what you decide to sell and what you're comfortable with. And you may find that what you decide to sell changes as time goes on. So you don't have to have it all figured out right now, but certainly you may find that fairly early on you get to make a decision about adding more and more to your shop, which is great, okay? So once you've got all of that set up, it's time to start selling, obviously. And when you're new to Pantydeal and maybe lacking confidence, it's a good idea to just spend a day or two getting to know the site and seeing what other people are posting and how they're interacting and getting used to the functionality of the site, okay? So just clicking around and getting to know where things are, and where you can see customers and reviews and people that have just joined and all kinds of things like that. And just really, once you have that familiarity, you certainly feel more confident. When you just start and you're not really sure where things are, then it can feel more daunting. So just take some time, rather than focus on, okay, I need to start selling and post my stuff and all that kind of thing. Just get to know how things work, and it'll just make things easier for you as time goes on. But then, of course, it's going to come time for you to decide, well, I'm going to start selling now, and maybe you're just going to post your items on the overview and repost them and wait for customers to come to you. Or maybe, if you feel more comfortable with it, you're going to actually reach out to potential customers and, make contact with them. So the first thing is, it's entirely up to you what you want to do. A lot of people don't feel comfortable reaching out to customers, and I'd say as a bare minimum, the etiquette is, if you are going to reach out to customers, that you don't just come in with a cold sale of like, hey, I'm new, buy my stuff. People don't respond well to that. Nobody responds well to that in any line of work. So it's a good idea just to introduce yourself, of course, or maybe say that you're new. Or perhaps you've seen something on their profile that you think's interesting, that you want to talk to them about. So just keep it light and keep it fun. That's the best advice that I can give to you. Because most customers will want to get to know a little bit about you before they make a purchase anyway. But it goes without saying that you should really take the time to look at customers' profiles before you make contact with them. And equally, if they're the one who reaches out to you, then again, take the time to click on their profile and find out a little bit more about what they're interested in, because it could be that, from doing that you find that you're not able to help them, or that you are the best person to sell to them. So, that just taking time to read people's profiles, especially if they've gone to all the effort of putting information in there, is just a courtesy. It's a common courtesy, good thing to do. But the main point I'd like to get across to you in this is that clear communication is so important, and it just avoids any misunderstandings. So when you are communicating, and this goes for buyers and sellers, there should of course be mutual respect and just very clear information so that nobody is left confused about what's happening. So to recap that particular aspect then, once you have everything set up, you may decide just simply to post your items on overview and repost. You may decide to reach out to potential customers or perhaps not. But overall, whenever you're communicating with potential customers and when they're communicating with you, make sure that, you keep things light, fun, respectful, and just we're there to help each other out. That's the bottom line there. So I hope that that's been helpful to you. I'll just run through everything again just so that we're very clear on how to get started on Pantydeal. So the first thing to do is absolutely check out what profile picture you want to use. Maybe have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 that you're going to interchange with, and keep things fresh and exciting with that. Number 2 is to put some effort into your profile description. Make sure that you're giving just the right amount of information, not too much, not too little, that you're covering some of the major bases that I talked about earlier. Number 3, to have images of your stock items once you've decided what it is that you want to sell, and perhaps being creative and putting together little collages of your images, or not, it's up to you, and working on the description that you're going to put into your shop, exactly what each image is, and giving as much information as possible. Not too much, not too little, again, just the right amount. Think about Goldilocks, just not too hot, not too cold, just perfect. Once you've got your shop items, you also want to think about your pricing, and again, that will feed into your profile description perhaps if you want to include that. And then you're ready to go, perhaps adding a few more pictures to your page, and then deciding on whether you're going to post or whether you're going to reach out to customers, and if so, how you're going to do that based on who they are and what they're interested in. And that's you ready to go. That's you ready to make your first sale, and hopefully your first of many. So I hope you found this useful. I know that certainly this is everything that I learned very quickly. Like I said, it was a steep learning curve, but it's something that I continue to learn and continue to tweak as I go along, and just see what works for you. Ultimately, you are in charge of the show here. This is your shop. These are your items. You decide what you're going to sell and how you're going to sell it, and that's what makes it such a fun and interesting side profession, well, for me anyway. So I hope you've enjoyed today's podcast. There will be more, and I look forward to speaking to you again in the future. Okay, bye-bye for now.